the Track is a monthly web TV show about cryptozoology, natural history, green issues, and whatever else the team feel like making up as they go along. Enjoy.
Well, Mr. John, welcome to the show, and tell me, what's on today's show?
Well, Hennis, it's the second part of Richard's and my top 10 favourite cryptozoological and Fortean books. Enjoy.
I really like the old credits.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Downs. I'm the director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and welcome to another episode of Hang On. We seem to have been transported to an area of South London because I can hear the guns of Brixton.
Rossiter, I believe you've got a special treat lined up for the kids at the outreach centre in Brixton. Oh, Barry, yes, we got a special day out for them. We're sending them to see a clown who is going to be showing them his collection of meat cleavers.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, now, as I said just now, my name is John Downs. I'm the director of an organisation called the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and welcome to another episode of On the Track. On the Track, for those of you who don't know, is a mixture, a melon, a muddle, I can't think of anything else beginning with M. Lauren, what begins with M?
Minx, of course.
Thanks, Lauren. I can deal with that. Yes, I can work with that one because, as the lovely Miss Isabel will tell you, there are plenty of minxes and always have been here at the Centre for Fortean Zoology. Now we've established what makes up the show, what's in it. Well, we have hard science, weird shit, and surreality. What's surreality, you may ask? Let's go and ask him. Well, it seems that either he didn't know or didn't want to tell us. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we've got two old friends coming to visit us in the studio today. It's Cara and it's Ralph the Monster. What are you here to do today, Cara and Ralph the Monster?
So, Ralph, what's coming up? Book review.
Well, I suppose Ralph the Monster is right. It is a book review, but it's not your normal type of book review. As anybody who watched last week will know, this is the second part of Richard Freeman and me going through our favourite Fortean and cryptozoological books. But I guarantee you something. If we were to do this again in 6 months' time, the top 10 will have changed dramatically. Not completely, but dramatically, because this all depends on where our heads are at the time. Enjoy. Richard, what's your number 3? I can't remember.
Well, before we move on, funnily enough, in Monstrum, Doc Shields also has a theory about the Loch Ness Monster being a mollusk, some sort of bizarre squid with a proboscis like a head and neck, which is equally as unlikely as Attila monstrum.
Oh, jolly good fun. I've always thought that the elephant squid was him playing the old surrealist game of exquisite corpse.
Well, he's a great fan of what's his name? Max Ernst, who did the painting Elephant Celebes that's in the Tate Modern, where he has a collage of this creature made out of an African grain storing building and a worm and a bull's horns. It's quite one of his best known paintings.
That's absolutely wonderful. I've always been very fond of Vincent de Bonte and
7 Days of Kindness
and the Adventures of Locke, bird-headed chimera man. And there are lots of links of that to Owlman, but this isn't the time or place because I could rattle on about the links to Max Ernst and Owlman for the rest of the show. But haven't got the time for me to rattle on about that because it's time for you, Richard. Tell us, what's your number 3?
I actually got this book by sending off through. Do you remember the part work, The Unexplained? Brilliant part.
Booksmith magazine.
Yeah, I recently got the whole lot bound because I had it as a kid, but I never finished getting all of it, and my collection was pretty patchy, so I brought the whole lot last year for £50, which was a bargain, I think.
I think it's a great bargain.
But
I think I paid over 100 for mine. That was 20 years ago.
I got this book, Alien Animals, by Janet and Colin Board, by sending off through the post from Unexplained. And Alien Animals is a look worldwide at monsters, not as cryptids or unknown animals, but as paranormal entities, weird supernatural manifestations. And it covers the Mothman of West Virginia, the previously mentioned Owlman, lake monsters, ape-like creatures seen in areas that couldn't biologically support them, and seen in tandem with weird lights and UFOs and alien big cats. And then it postulates that these aren't really animals at all, they're paranormal manifestations. And it was the first book I read that took this route, and it fascinated me. There were books before, like The Dragon and the Disc, but I didn't read that till considerably after I read Alien Animals. Alien Animals 1980 was the first one I actually read. There's John Keel's Strange Creatures from Time and Space, and then Jerome Clark and Lauren Coleman's Creatures from the Outer Edge, D. Scott Rogo's The Earth's Secret Inhabitants, and the list goes on. And it's not really cryptozoology at all. It's got more in common with parapsychology, but I find it fascinating because if you're painting with very, very thick brush strokes, there are two kinds of monsters. There are the true cryptids, which is the stuff I mostly look for, which are flesh and blood animals, which are unknown to science, like the Yeti or the Mongolian deathworm, or are thought to be extinct but are actually still around, like the Tasmanian wolf or the great ivory-billed woodpecker, or have grown to huge sizes, like giant crocodiles, giant anacondas, giant pythons, things like that. And then you get the weird ones, like the Dover Demon and Mothman and Owlman, and modern day sightings of dragons, which of course can't be flesh and blood animals, particularly when they're flying around Surrey. So there's something else. There's some sort of paranormal manifestation. And my new book, The Highest Strangeness,
available from all good bookstores and most shitty ones.
that is a sort of synthesis really of all of these books. It was inspired by stuff like Alien Animals and The Dragon and the Disc and Creatures from the Outer Edge and Keel's works. And it brings it up to date. Well, I say it brings it up to date, but since I wrote it, a whole other load of shit has gone down. So I'm currently writing a sequel which has the working title of Strange Cases. But it's not an either or. You can be interested in both and you can investigate both. With true cryptids, there's a chance we'll get the answers, we'll find the creatures, we'll prove them. But with the supernatural stuff, I think the best we can do is postulate, because I don't think we're ever going to catch one of those.
I think the most important thing to do is, even if you are dealing with subjects which cannot be defined within purely zoological or physical frames of reference, one still has to take the scientific approach and the scientific method. One has to keep meticulous notes, one has to test hypotheses, and one has to be as scientific as possible, even when you're dealing with stuff which would make most scientists scream and turn on their tail.
So all the best ghost hunters use a scientific method.
Yeah, it's the only way to do this properly. And that's what annoys me about so many of the so-called British Bigfoot hunters. I'm not saying that I hate the British Bigfoot. I much prefer to call them woodwows, which is what they've been called for centuries in Britain and Northern Europe. There is no doubt that woodwows exist. I know this, I've seen one. But if you're investigating them, you must do it scientifically. Just rushing around the place and saying, hey, look, there's a squatch and then there are woods, and then running around a bit more. It's just a pointless and slightly annoying waste of time. So, what have we got next? We've got my number 3. Mysterious America. The first edition of Mysterious America by Lauren Coleman is one of my favourite Fortean books of all time. It was a complete and utter inspiration to me, and I have read it and reread it and reread it more times than I like to remember. It's an absolutely wonderful book, and I have on several occasions congratulated Lauren on having written such an absolutely seminal tome. It does exactly what it says on the tin. It is the stories of broadly what is known as weird shit in North America. And it covers some absolutely fantastic things, including things that are in that sort of liminal space between flesh and blood cryptozoology and hocus pocus parapsychology, things like the mystery kangaroos of North America and the mystery North American maned lions. There's an article on those, by the way, by Richard Muirhead in the latest issue of Animals and Men. It's a brilliant book, isn't it, Richard?
Yes, I read this long before I got hold of a copy of On the Track of Unknown Animals. I read it shortly after I'd read Janet and Colin Board's Alien Animals, and it's a tremendous book, as is the follow-up, Curious Encounters. And you can see that in his youth he really did put in the legwork. He went round the USA investigating all of these strange stories, and I'd say it was the best book of its kind, and it's the best book about the Fortean of a single country.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever been or could be bettered. And the people who've tried to better it have failed signally. I think if only for this, Lauren deserves to go down in Fortean history. Okay, you're number 2, Richard. Number 2.
My number 2 is Out of the Shadows, The Mystery Animals of Australia by Tony Healy and Paul Cropper, who are my favourite living Fortean field investigators. Again, these guys have really put in the legwork. They've been all over Australia looking for weird creatures, and the book covers thylacines in Tasmania, thylacines on the mainland, the yowie, the Australian hominid, and the bunyip in all its many forms. And I asked Tony once why didn't he include sea serpents, Australian sea serpents, in this, because there are loads of very good sea serpent sightings from around Australia, and he said they just didn't have the room. It would require a whole other book if he was going to take on sea serpents as well. Oh, and they do Australian big cats as well. That was the chapter I missed. Yeah, they do Aussie big cats, and it's a absolutely cracking book. Particularly the yowie material is really good, and they went on to write 2 books specifically on the yowie, and they've branched out into other areas of Forteana like poltergeist as well. The book on the Australian poltergeist by Tony and Paul is fantastic as well, but this was their first major work. It's very hard to get hold of now. I ordered it through the post when it first came out, but apparently it's much sought after now, and it goes for a bomb. And we've always wanted to reprint it at some point, but it's a truly great book, and well written, gripping, fascinating, and by A1 researchers.
Yeah, I can't argue with anything that you said there, Richard. It's a brilliant book. And in fact, when you said earlier about Lauren's book being the best look at one country, I think this one gives it a good run for its money.
Yeah, but the thing is, this is specifically cryptids, whereas Lauren's one goes over into other areas of Forteana as well.
Yeah.
So this is specifically cryptids. But yeah, it's the best book on Australian cryptozoology, and there's some good books on Australian cryptozoology about.
You're reading a book about the yowie at the moment, aren't you?
Yes, Neil Frost's Fatfoot, which is I've only just started reading it. It's 700 pages. It's a doorstop of a book. So I'll do a review of that when I've finished it. But his theory is that the yowie is some sort of marsupial that has evolved in parallel evolution with primates, which is an interesting theory.
Yeah, it's a theory that's been around for a while. I don't think it's true.
No, I don't agree with it. If the yowie exists as a flesh and blood animal, I think it's some sort of hominin. But Graham Joyner wrote a very poorly written book about it years ago, and very overpriced, in which he actually attacks Paul and Tony in it for not agreeing with his marsupial theory. And to be honest, it's a lousy book, Graham Joyner's book on the yowie. But Neil Frost's one is very interesting so far.
Now we go to my number 2 book, Disneyland of the Gods by John Keel. I was going to choose The Mothman Prophecies by John Keel because that's the one everybody would expect me to choose, because it is an absolutely classic, wonderful book, and it ties in all the research I've done over the years into the Cornish Owlman. But from a purely personal point of view, although I massively enjoyed reading Mothman Prophecies, I found that the Disneyland of the Gods was better and in fact I think it's the best book I've ever read, which encapsulates the pure stereochemical wonder of the world when you start to look at it through a Fortean lens. Again, sorry, I'm coming back to Doc Shields, who seems to have his fingerprints all over this episode. But Tony Shields taught me a lot about his outlook on things, which he calls Surrey alchemy. And this book just underlines it, and in a peculiar way, I think encapsulates the complete nonsense that the world can become when one allows it to, even better than anything that Tony Shields wrote. It's an absolutely wonderful book about what happens when people's lives go completely and utterly haywire for no discernible reason. And I truly can't recommend it enough. Everybody has Mothman Prophecies or Jadoo on their books of famous and recommended Fortean books. I don't think I've ever seen anybody recommend Disneyland of the Gods, but I do like it so much. And again, I can't really recommend it to anyone highly enough. Have you read it, Rich?
No, I've never read Disneyland of the Gods.
You've read Mothman?
I've read Mothman Prophecies. Yeah.
I remember our old friend Andy Roberts saying that the most disappointing part of his professional career was meeting and interviewing John Keel, who turned out to be depressingly normal and didn't want to talk about any of this weird shit stuff, which is a great pity because I think it was him who even coined the term highest strangeness, wasn't it?
Can't remember.
It was either him or Scott Corrales. And I think it's an absolutely smashing book, and I can't recommend it highly enough. But now we have something that's rather strange. Richard and I both made our list, and both of us had the same book at number 1. And you guys out there can probably guess what it is. But Richard, it is
On the Track of Unknown Animals by Dr. Bernard Heuvelmans. It's the book that kick-started it all. When the English translation was released, it's the book that sparked cryptozoology. And it looks at mostly terrestrial cryptids all around the world, everything from the Yeti, orang pendek, to giant ground sloths, some giant anacondas in South America, Mecalium bembe in the Congo, and the Nanda bear, the Tasmanian wolf, the bunyips, the strange creatures of Madagascar. It was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And people have said, well, none of these creatures have been proven to exist, so cryptozoology is a pseudoscience, ducky. What a load of nonsense. Of course it's not a pseudoscience. Cryptozoology is simply a branch of zoology when it's done properly. The search for unknown animals is a branch of proper scientific zoology. And
I think 100 years ago, every zoologist was a cryptozoologist.
Yes, they were. And he points out how the gorilla and the okapi were pure fiction before the first type specimens were discovered. Now, there's lots within this book that I disagree with. Times have changed and moved on. I think the Mecalium bembe, which he thought was a surviving sauropod dinosaur, is mostly folkloric. Possibly it's bolstered up by sightings of huge monitor lizards or massive pythons rearing their necks out of the water, or the backs of outsized soft-shelled turtles. But it's mainly folkloric. I think the giant lemurs of Madagascar have long gone, sadly, although the giant fouche might still be there. But so a lot of the other things like the yeti, the orang pendek, and the giant anaconda are creatures that are well within the realms of possibility. And of course the Tasmanian wolf, the thylacine, for my money, the most likely to exist of all of them. And it was the book that, you know, got so many people hooked. Funnily enough, I'd read lots and lots of cryptozoology books before it, because it was out of print for such a long time, and I didn't discover it until I found an abridged copy in a little bookshop in Coventry, and then I finally got hold of the original, which I still treasure. And it is the #1 book of cryptozoology.
I've always said that for somebody who professes to be a cryptozoologist, not to have a copy of this on their bookshelf is the same as somebody who professes to be a priest and not to have a copy of the Bible on their bookshelves. It is that important. It is the cornerstone on what all of this, everything that we come together twice a week to talk about, everything that Richard and I have dedicated our lives, and I'm not being overly dramatic here, we have dedicated our lives to this, and will be dedicating the rest of our lives, however much longer we have on this planet. And it's all because of Heuvelmann. He was a strange man, Bernard, I knew him. I've got a copy of the first English edition of On the Track upstairs in my shelves, saying, inscribed, "To my brother in cryptozoology, best wishes, Bernard Heuvelmann." And I am so proud of that. That's one of my most prized possessions. He was a strange man, Bernard. He and I didn't always get on. We disagreed about all sorts of things. But I feel very blessed to have known him. I am very proud to have known him. And I am very grateful to him for having written this absolutely magnificent book, which, if it hadn't for the fact that he hadn't been for the fact that he went out and wrote it a few years before I was born, my life would have taken a completely and utterly different path.
So, John, how about honourable mentions?
That's a good idea.
I would go with The Wake of the Sea Serpents, also by Bernard Heuvelmans, although I totally disagree with his classification. It's a listing of sea serpent sightings from about the 16th century up until the 1960s, and for that alone it's very interesting. He does tend to bend things to fit into his preconceived categories, which I don't always agree with. He tends to make everything a marine mammal, and it doesn't always fit, but it's a fascinating book in that it's got so many historical accounts in it, and it's really interesting. It's not as good as On the Track, but it's a very good and very worthy book all the same.
I give an honourable mention to Mr. Cats of the World by Dr. Carl Schuger, who's an old friend of ours. Of all the books he's written, and they're all very good, this one is absolutely, superlatives fail me. It is an absolutely wonderful book. And it is, in the same way as Heuvelmann's work propelled me into the path of doing cryptozoology as a hobby. It was reading Mystery Cats of the World that propelled me onto the path of doing it as a job, because he opened so many doors and left so many of the doors ajar so you could see glimpses of something round the corner of the door that you wanted to research yourself. And it's an absolutely fantastic book. And I would like to thank my old friend Leslie Pring, who gave me a copy for my 30th birthday and set me on the professional path I've been following ever since. Absolutely brilliant book. Don't you agree, Rich?
Yeah, it's a great book, but my favourite by Carl is The Lost Ark, which I was given as a birthday present as well. And I think it's Carl's greatest work. It's about all the different animals that have been rediscovered within the last century, or discovered within the last century. And then there's a short chapter about what might be coming in the near future. But it's not just well-known ones like the Komodo dragon and the gorilla and the okapi. It's all sorts of obscure things like the Chinese crocodile lizard and things like that. And the Congo peafowl, and it's a really, really good book. Really love it.
Absolutely smashing. I agree with you, Richard. I just slightly prefer Mystery Cats, but both of them are wonderful, wonderful books. Any other honourable mentions?
Yes, Janet and Colin Board's Bigfoot case book, which does much the same for Bigfoot as In the Wake of the Sea Serpents did for sea serpents. It chronicles every Bigfoot sighting from the year dot up to about 1980, and for that alone it's wonderful. You can just look up a year and see that all the Bigfoot sightings, and then there's analysis and theories about what it might be, but it's absolutely great. Also by them, Modern Mysteries of Britain and Modern Mysteries of the World, which again looks chronologically at mysteries in Britain and mysteries in the world of all kinds of Forteana, and they're big, thick, well-researched, sumptuous books, which are absolutely great and a great resource as well.
I will go for another one. Would be John Michel and Bob Rickard's Living Wonders.
Oh, what a great book that is.
Absolutely fantastic.
I came across that in a mobile library when I was bunking off PE, because I hate sport. I find it a waste of time, tedious, vacuous, common, moronic. And
Richard, stop holding back. Tell us what you really feel.
Football, God, how vacuous is football, and the amount of money that gets wasted on it. Anyway, our PE teacher, who was a guy called Mr. Jones, wasn't the sharpest tool in the box, and a bunch of other sport-hating, bookish lads like me said, "Oh, we want to get him training for sports day and the cross-country running," and he'd go, "Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, you go off and do your cross-country run." And we, in our PE kit, we'd be running out of the front of the school, and then we'd go round to this old lady's house who would give us tea and cake and say, "Oh, it's a disgrace making you run in all weathers like this. You come in and have some cake and tea with me." And we'd also go to this mobile library that was parked up just down the road from the school, and that's where I found the copy of Living Wonders, and I later found it in a second-hand bookshop and got my own copy of it, and it is absolutely great. It really is. It's got that feel of early Fortean times, before Fortean times was available in the newsagents. It was a little like A5 magazine, almost like a fanzine that you'd send off for, and you could only get it in certain shops in Glastonbury and London and places like that, but you could send off for it through the post. But it had that feel to it, that sort of early, raw, enthusiastic, joyful feel, that this joy of the unknown. And they did another one. What was the other? Phenomena?
Yeah,
which was very good as well.
I prefer Living.
Oh, so the Living Wonders is the better of the two, but they're both very good. Yeah.
I've known Bob Rickard for over 30 years now. For those of you not aware, he was and is the founding editor of Fortean Times, and still turns up in its pages now and then. And John Michel was a mate of mine for a long time. He died 15 years ago, maybe somewhere between 15 and 20 years ago. And he's probably best known to those of us of a certain age with wild staring eyes and stupid hats and big bushy beards as being the author of a book called The View from Atlantis, which was on every hippie mystic or aspiring hippie mystic's bookshelf. And between them, they came up with absolutely, Richard's right, it's joyous. It's the best way of describing it. It's joyously enthusiastic. It covers all sorts of bits and bobs of Forteana.
Attacks by birds, of eagles, and carrying off children and things like that.
It is the main reason why, when I started the CFZ, I didn't call us the Centre for Cryptozoology or the Centre for Cryptozoological Research. I invented my own portmanteau discipline of Fortean zoology because of this one book. Because by then I had gone off into a corner once and got stoned with John Michel, which is something we did reasonably regularly for the next 10 years or so. And I realized that the things that I wanted to do weren't just defined by the science laid out. So I decided to lay out one of my own. Fantastic. Absolutely brilliant.
Mm. The Borderlands. Have you read The Borderlands?
Oh, Borderlands!
What a great book that is. Mike Dash's The Borderlands.
Oh, fantastic.
Fantastic. Once again, a wedge of a book covering all of the major areas of Forteana and wonderfully written. And again, like Uncanny, Into the Uncanny, walking that fine line between not being too credulous and not being too sceptical.
And it's magnificently written. He is a very worthy academic. Again, he's someone he's been friends with. Richard and I have been friends with him for 30 odd years. And he's a lovely guy. And him and his daughter used to come along for the Weird Weekend sometimes. And we had him as a speaker, and I think he came along just as a guest sometimes. And it was always lovely to bump into him. He is a remarkably erudite and intelligent academic who doesn't feel like the sort of pop academics you have these days who are all bing bang pow, guess what guys? He feels like he's from a bygone age. Do you know what I mean, Richard?
Yeah.
Lovely guy, fantastic book. Again, I'm beginning to wish I'd made this 10 books each, but I tell you what, we're going to do this again sometime. We're going to do 5 more books that the two of us both do.
It's like I was commenting online on this YouTube channel that reviews old films and television, called Television, and this guy had done his top 20 Doctor Who stories, which were all from the classic era, and I put mine up, and then I did honourable mentions, and there was a I'd done 20 my favourite, then the honourable mentions was about 26, I think. More.
Which is why, as editor and presenter of this circus, I am going to call a halt to it, because we're going to be back doing the same thing very soon.
If you want to support us and help us make more content like these, please press like, subscribe, follow our Facebook page and check out our Patreon.
And as the ghost of Joe Strummer, who's an ever more regular visitor to my little studio, says, don't forget to ring the notification bell, otherwise you'll miss the new episodes.
And that would be an awful pity, wouldn't it?
If you've been affected by any of the topics in today's episode, you can just bugger off, because we don't give a monkeys. Bloody well get a grip. Sort your own bloody problems out rather than ringing up somewhere.
That was a public information film.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's about it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I very much enjoyed putting it together, and as I said, I think it's almost certain that me and Richard are going to come back and do 5 more Fortean books that we can't live without very soon. And I think, put your answers in the comments below, but if you enjoyed this, I think I'm going to ask some other Fortean luminaries to give us their top 5 books and why. I'm going to be back on Wednesday, and what are we doing on Wednesday? Well, from memory, shut up, dog. Can you hear my idiotic dog on the landing? Apparently someone dared to walk down the road outside the house. And he doesn't like it.
Seal, doesn't he?
Yes, he does sound like a demented seal. I've got V. McCrinnan here. Say hello to the boys and girls, V.
Hello, boys and girls.
I'm going to be back on Wednesday. What are we talking about on Wednesday? Well, on Wednesday, from memory, we have the lovely Miss Guinevere. And she is going to be showing us her collection of micro snails. You cannot get content like this anywhere else on the internet.
And it is, listen, I am not particularly into snails, but I watched the episode with John online a couple of days ago, and I was absolutely enthralled by it.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic, and I can't recommend it enough. So that's on Wednesday, and I'll be back on Saturday. What are we talking about on Saturday? Well, it's the first of 2 parts when I interview Mick McLaren, who is the head honcho of the Winter Hill investigation team, a group that I've heard about but know nothing about until I actually spoke to him. I'm interviewing him because Harlem, who as you all know is a good friend of the show, he recommended that we have him on, and I'm very glad we did because he's a fascinating bloke and really interesting and nice guy. So that's next Saturday, and I'm going to be there doing what I always do on Saturday. So,
Mr. McCrinnan,
Yes, Mr. Brown.
are you going to be there watching it on Saturday, Mr. McCrinnan?
Well, yes, of course I am.
Well, if you're there watching it, Mr. McCrinnan, I'm going to be there doing all the gubbins I usually do on a Saturday afternoon. The notifications, the live chats, and all the other stuff before I then nearly always go to sleep for the rest of the afternoon. And if you're there watching it,
Mr. McCrinnan,
I'm most certainly going to be, wait for it,
I'm not a number, I'm a free man.
seeing you.